Okay, then we can start. Melzai will do the first yearly review of the Haecksen for over 10 years, and I'm very excited to hear what she's going to tell. And welcome to Melzai. Nice. Good morning. Nice you're all awake. Oh, last night maybe the party was a bit longer. My voice thinks it was a bit longer, but I didn't actually do it too wild. So that's the first review for over 10 years from the Haecksen, and that's beautiful because we're getting 30 years old. That's why there's a cake here, and now I have to stand next to this cake for over half an hour and show you everything we did over the last year and what we did as Haecksen. And I shouldn't think about this cake now, but afterwards we get all cake. So let's start. The Haecksen. Some of you might not know it yet. Some of you might not have know anything. So we'll explain it all. Haecksen are a group who find themselves within the group of women. We are decentralized, and that's all the yellow points in this slide. We are everywhere in Austria, in Switzerland, in Germany. Sometimes we have a little bit of clustering, but mostly we are meeting on the internet. At the moment we are 300. Maybe after the Congress we are 350. Last year we gained 100 Haecksen over the year. That's more than 70%. So we're quite working. We have double the size of other AFAs, and we're growing quite fast, so we'll see. So in general, we are structured in about 12 areas, and we have a geek end where we decide who is going to do what. For example, build up our assembly, doing press and everything. There's additional helpers. There's about new helpers, trainees, and sometimes we kind of choose people on our mailing list and ask them, maybe you could help, would you like to help? Because activating those 300 people is kind of the next step to make great things happen after people come to our mailing list, and it's actually looking quite well at the moment. We are already somewhat successful, and we're trying to get away from like vitamin B for getting access to special activities, so everyone can actually participate in the Haecksen. And our interests are really broadly from CTF over technical stuff, politics. We have social studies majors. We have kind of everything you can imagine. Mainly we are a chaos meetup. We are not officially an AFA. We have an account for donations at Ontropia. So if you like to do a donation for us, you can give us some money and you can actually put it in your Okay. So this year we thought about why are we Haecksen and what does it mean? This is a trigger warning about really negative things people do to each other. So if you have problems with such topics, the slides are marked, and maybe you have to look away if that's triggering for you. Afterwards, it's going to be better. I'm promising. I made the slides. Okay, now it's going about witch burning. Our name is a pun or like a combination of Haecksen, witches, and hacking. That's why we have the AE in our name. And the witch burning started about 1550 after Christ in Europe. And now to talk about the context of those witch hunts, So until 1300, people lived in village communities and were working together on areas for growing on farmland. So the community all had some part in the farming land, even like widows and smaller families could have part in those so-called almendas and grow their food. But that was changed after 1400, where those almendas were fenced in. So people who didn't have like strong family bonds or had access to those lands, they didn't have access to those lands to grow their food and didn't have food anymore. And so there were riots, very broadly spread riots in Europe. So about 1450, there was also a small ice age. So food that was grown, the amount of food that was grown decreased, and wages also decreased because food didn't grow that well, and crops decreased. And we have here the kilograms of wheat on the side, and the amount of wheat decreased, and then there also was Black Death, and so it was quite bad. But we think it's told that there were 1/3 of the population died of the Black Death, of the plague. So there were too few people. There was a lot of work, but there wasn't enough people to do that work. There was a huge interest for more population, for babies, children, so there could be more people to work. So this whole situation contributed to so-called farmers' riots, but that might be not the right word for it, because that might also have been women riots. And pretty much everyone rioted because those circumstances were not acceptable, because everyone was hungry and there was death and illness and no one did understand what was happening. And there were about 31 riots which were made only by women in France, and there was a lot of other riots which were also where women contributed quite a lot. And there were also soldiers and other groups, so it's not quite correct to also only call it farmers' riots. And also at a time where the witch burning was highest, the number of witch burnings was highest, you can here see the people tried and to death. And that was also at the same time when Martin Luther started with his theses. And so the Protestant religion started and the critique on the Catholic religion. And then there was the 30-year war. So we had bad crops, death by the plague, and religious wars. And then at this time, the so-called witch burnings the numbers of witch burnings were highest. And that wasn't a local problem. That was pretty much all over Europe, with a quite high point in Baden-Württemberg. There died quite a lot of people. 85% of those were women. Also homosexual men, women were persecuted. And well, you could say, oh well, there were people who were a bit uncomfortable for the rest of the population, and there was hysteria, and that's completely different from our today's population. But also there was like hundreds of young men going through the cities in Italy and other places where those men went into rooms of young maids or so and raped those women. And so the whole climate was really against women. So for women who were, for example, not married, they were like nothing worse in those climates, in those social structures. And so it was easier to fight back those farmers' riots. So by segregating those groups by gender and making a certain gender like the target group, then you can quiet down those riots and to fight against those riots. There was a decision by the state to do those persecutions against witches and to let those groups go through the cities and rape people. So we think it wasn't a witch burning, it was trials against women. So the next thing is that afterwards there was like established the image of the virgin, the mother, or whore. So you're either the nice girl, quiet, peaceful, or mother and caring for a child, and there was a birth decline, so it was quite important that women were pregnant. In France, they introduced that women had to announce when they were pregnant, or you're a whore. Because something else, there's nothing in between. You cannot be a successful woman with a child, but who might be not living with their partner because it didn't work. That concept wasn't okay. Now we think that we might have overcome this for 30 years because, I mean, you know, Madonna and everything, but we're not through with this. What we can also say, there was a punishment back then that women who were talking too much, there was put a cage over their head and they were walked on a leash through the town because they couldn't keep their tongue in tow. Those putting on a stage is kind of an image why people should talk their mind and shouldn't be kept from talking their mind. Okay, so that was the history, and of course now everything is much better. We have a nice system, we are all enlightened, we can mostly write and read. Not all yet, but it's getting there, and everything's better. But now it's the second part, and now it's getting really disgusting. And one important thing, these statistics are binary, so trans persons are not in those numbers, and so there's a huge dark part, and that's not okay. We are bringing you the numbers we have, and we're sorry that at the moment we cannot do it better. There's a EU study from 2014, and there was 22% of women who said they had experienced violence in partnerships. That's about a quarter. I've already heard a third. So that's quite uncomfortable. Every fourth woman experiences violence from their partner. There's also 5% of women who talk about that they experienced rape. That's quite a high number. We have 300 people in the Haecksen, so you can do the numbers. And that doesn't mean that like every fifth woman, but that's quite high. There's also 53% of women changed their habits within a partnership, who changed their habits to accommodate their partner's needs and to not become a target. So maybe if you meet a person and think they are free, maybe they're not, because they all have the reflex to control themselves. Maybe they think about a lounge which is dark and they don't go there because they're afraid, and so they change their habits to be safer. And then there's also a criminologist who said, well, from 100 rapes, there's only 15 who go to court, and only 3 to 21% of those are actually convicted. So, and that's quite a negative number for actually making the situation better. But that's how it is at the moment, unfortunately. well, we have so many things where maybe it's getting better. There's so much where we grow together, like football world championships and Olympia and stuff. So there was a study that when the own team wins, the violence against partners raises for 25%. If there's a lost game, it raises by 36%. The next study is death. It's a bit tricky with the words. I'm sorry, it's quite hard to translate. But yeah, there's like different laws about murder and death and how that works with the heuristic terms and the legal terms. So if we look at the statistics from 2017 from the BKA, there we have 113 cases of women who are victims to partner violence. There's also men, which are 20,000. So women is about 113,000 and men is 2,000. And then there's also entrance into flats, which is a bit higher than the higher number. And then there's also femicide, so number of women who are murdered by their partners or ex-partners. So we have it here through the years on the second graph. And so we have about 150 to 130 in red, and in yellow is the men who were killed by their partner or ex-partner. And over the years, and the blue one is tried murders. So, but 3 times as high as successful murders. So that's about 350 people. So if you look at the statistics, about 1 woman per day, like there's 1 tried murder per day, and every 3rd day this murder is successful. So that's way too high. That's terrible. But it's getting worse. So the Time magazine, or like the Time, the newspaper, they collected all those cases. And here we have the first case, 60 years of marriage. She is 89 and she wants to move to another home and have her quiet, and then he hits her to death. And then the next one is stalking. It's like an online phenomenon. He made a fake profile, gets a key, gets into the flat illegally, and then he thinks it's not murder. Next thing, he is computer scientist. He murders her and rapes her sister so bad she hasn't woken up yet. And the last one, where the victim is only 15 years old, and she had been to the police, and she had claimed she had went to the police because of violence against her and drug abuse with 15 years old. And if we think about the police, and where only a few percentage of employees are women and only about 5% are homosexual, and most are cis men, straight men, and from those, by statistics, there's about a third who actually had some kind of violent act against women. I mean, that's just the statistics. That's not against the people who work there, but the statistics says that, and that's our climate where we live in, and where we have to change this climate of violence against women, because it's terrible and it's horrible.
But thankfully, even during the witch trials, there was a ray of light. So when the fishers heard that their wives and daughters were going to be tried as witches, they came back early from the fish trips and attacked the harbor and got their wives and daughters back. So what happened back then can happen today too. So we've met a lot of people who are working against us, and we just have to work together and work against us some more. So what the Haecksen do is we sit together, talk about the topic, and we do things like have breakfasts, we do fires, and we talk about it in a positive way. So have a positive place to meet other people who are similar than the people you want to talk about those topics to. We do memorials for remembering people who've been forgotten, especially women in IT and sciences, and to honor them, to remember them, that there's people who've always been against that climate. And maybe those memorials can be a reason for young Haecksen to think about this and say that this is a good thing to keep going and to be part of this and to keep contributing. So what we also do are postcards and stickers and stamps. And what others people do, for example, Electrol, they're also making postcards and stamps and giving them to people. So it's not just the Haecksen who do this, this is a lot of other people who help. For example, we also read books. Those are 3 books. We have a feminist library at the Congress, and every time Haecksen bring different books, so the library is always different. The workshop yesterday was great. And we just keep going. We have a new homepage, we have mailing lists, and those will help a lot with organizing. We have a Nextcloud, and who does NGO work knows it's a lot more helpful to have the tech to aid with that. We had our first camp village this year, and we have an air representative now. So we have a lot more from the whole CCC Regio work. And the climate group did a lot of work for the climate strike in November, and we're working on bias a lot, especially bias in machine learning, but also there's feminist aspects and technical aspects for that. We had 2 geekends, those were great, and there will be more. We had more memorials, and we turned 30. We also have a lot of new local groups, so there's so many of them that we now have a little network. Usually they're in the hackspaces of the CCC and they're integrated. They do Python, they read books, they go to Girls' Days, they do talks there. They meet up for breakfast or after work. Most of them meet about 3 hours in the space. And from the ones I've heard, they've had really positive effects on the spaces and getting more people to go back to the CCC. And this year, we're welcoming Bamberg and Frankfurt to our local groups, and we hope for more next year. We also decided to work with the Women and Computer Stuff, or FUCK people, this year, and we founded the FNTI group, short for Women, Non-Binary, Trans, and Inter people. And you can find that on the web. And we did so much talks this year on the Congress that my voice is now really sore. And even day 3 was just amazing. And it's a mix of people and topics that are really important. And it covers basically everything. For health reasons and for concentration reasons, we do yoga, we talk about menstruation, we talk about the good talk about the anger, and we talk about basically everything. We do knitting, we basically do everything. And we're almost through. This year we're just doing twice as much. Of course. We have a whole year, no camp in between. It's going to be great. So we're at 2020, and we'll just do more of everything. The Easter hack in Hamburg. We have a really well-integrated Haecksen group, so there will be a lot of Haecksen at the Easter hack. They might be going camping. We'll see who actually wants to go. We have a camp spot, but this camp spot actually have internet. We do have 1 or 2 geekends. It's not quite sure how many yet, but we'll find out. And the nice thing about the geekends is they're sponsored by the CCC, so they're fairly affordable for people. So if you're a local group, just send us an email at info@hacksen.org. Usually it's a meeting once a week and we talk about different things. And if you want to be one of us, just talk to us personally and leave your email address. Otherwise, it's not going to work. You're going to need to have a personal talk with one of us. Otherwise, this is not going to work. Okay, what else am I missing? Small tip, if I say breakfast or talking mumble, then that's a nice way of saying it can be anything. If there's a orga version of it, it's just going to be organizing things, so it's going to be really boring. But talking mumbles, if you're going to go, or the breakfast, those are the interesting topics. And they might not be in the abstract, but those are the interesting ones. And that's what it is. Let's go for questions. And now there's going to be cake.
So, you've been listening to the translation of the Haecksen yearly review, and we're translating the talk where Escarina and Lottie. The talk was by Melzai, and we would be very grateful for any feedback via Twitter using the hashtag C3T. And now the questions. Hello, I've got a question, and I'm one of those people who doesn't know anything about technological things, and the Haecksen would be one place where I might be able to learn such things and get into it easily. And maybe wanted to ask if you do workshops, something really basic, easy for people who don't know anything about that.
Surprisingly, there was nothing this year, but we're planning on doing it, and the idea is to have it next year. So maybe it's going to be next year, but you can also just write down your wish, and then we'll find somebody for next year, because making a wish or putting it out there, and that makes people realize that there's actually a need there. And for example, the need to learn how to change a lock for ex-partner reasons. Then we had a workshop about how to do that, and there were 30 to 40 people actually learning how to figure out how to change that lock. Yeah, so just tell us what you're wishing for, what you want, and we'll put it on the list for what we're going to be doing next year. So in the local groups, this is how it works. If you're near any one of those local groups, just come there during the year.
So, wie schaut's aus?
Any more questions? Everyone's waiting for the cake. That's a great cake. It was too late for the party, so it looks really great. Okay, so that was it. Thank you very much for listening.